Nick Armstrong is among Fort Collins' most interesting people. He's the Geek-in-Chief of WTF Marketing, the pepper pioneer of FTW Hot Sauce, and the lead organizer of both Founded in FoCo and the Fort Collins Comic-Con. He's also a freelance community organizer in various ancillary capacities and a recently barely unsuccessful candidate for Fort Collins City Council. Nick has a great business journey, basically unemployable from the start. After earning his BS in business administration with both marketing and computer science focus, Nick got into the corporate world, where he rambled from job to job for a bit before getting into his own things, and there's a lot of them. From organizing Ignite Fort Collins to starting a NoCo Comic Con so he didn't have to go to Denver, Nick has 28 experience lines on his LinkedIn profile. In this episode, we zoom especially in on the Founded in FoCo event. Nick highlights some of the amazing speakers and workshops and events that'll be going on in early March, and make sure to stop by for LoCo Think Tank Celebrating Community Coffee to kick off the festivities on March 1st. Nick also shares a lot about his city council run and more about his newest venture, FTW Hot Sauce, for the win. Tune in and enjoy my conversation with Nick Armstrong.
Let's have some fun.
Welcome to the LoCo Experience Podcast. On this show, you'll get to know business and community leaders from all around northern Colorado and beyond. Our guests share their stories, business stories, life stories, stories of triumph and of tragedy, and through it all, you'll be inspired and entertained. These conversations are real and raw, and no topics are off limits. So pop in a breath mint and get ready to meet our latest guest. Welcome back to the LoCo Experience Podcast. I'm here today with Nick Armstrong, and Nick is the founder and Geek-in-Chief of WTF Marketing. He is the lead organizer of Founded in FoCo, the lead organizer of Fort Collins Comic-Con, and the founder of an amazing hot sauce, I presume, that he just gifted to me, the For the Win brand.
That's right.
So,
when we first met, you gifted me with the spice.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Oh,
the
I
LoCo
did.
Think
I wondered
Tank
when
spice.
it was that I served you. Well, you're just such a good community servant that that's how we reward people sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool to be able to give a gift, and that stuck with me. So that was
cool. Good. I'm so glad. That makes me happy.
Although we did have to get you a longer notepad for all the titles and things.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's about all the notes I'll take.
Yeah.
It's basically back to my college days here.
Yeah.
Just winging it
and
daily.
It's good to know, like, who's on your podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
But thank you for having me.
Of course. So, where should we start?
Well,
I feel. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You're here because we're going to talk about Founded in FoCo in part.
That's right. Yeah. Founded in Fort Collins, formerly FoCo Startup Week,
Yep.
Fort Collins Startup Week.
When is that?
It is March 1st through 3rd.
Okay.
And it's going to be at Front Range Community College. It's going to be an awesome experience for all involved.
We were just looking at the schedule. I think we'll get this out like last week of January, first week of February.
Great.
So that's awesome.
You can build your schedule now.
Right, exactly. So we'll talk more about Founded in FoCo, but I think your why in getting to be the lead organizer of Founded in FoCo is going to be fleshed out through this conversation. And you're a pretty interesting guy.
Thank you.
And I have a confession right early in this show. When I first met you, you're kind of brash and annoying like me in some ways, and you had this business called WTF Marketing. And I was like, it's just a little too much in your face. Like, even though I'm the guy that's like in your face a lot.
When I first started, I was so upset with the state of marketing. I had just 2 years earlier graduated from CSU with a dual degree in marketing and CIS. And all of the sales and marketing jobs I could find were cold calling. And, that's not anything a recent grad wants to go into.
Right.
You don't really
want
to
to plus you don't know anything.
Exactly, yeah. And so I went in and was the world's worst programmer for 2 years. And they actually paid me to stop. and I looked around and said, what do we have in the marketplace? And there were all these social media gurus. You remember the era of the guru? Like
Sure.
the Facebook guru,
Yeah.
They didn't have Facebook pages, like Facebook business pages. So you created a profile, like a fake person, for your business back then.
Oh, okay.
And they had Twitter and all this other stuff, but nobody really knew how to do it. So all these small business owners were getting bilked
Right.
by these quote-unquote gurus who were snake oil salesmen, and it was really frustrating for me.
So when you're talking guru, are you talking about like Mark Zuckerberg and stuff, or local
No.
gurus that were like, I'll get you on Facebook and whatever?
Yeah, exactly. They were like a dime a dozen. They were going out there and they would like, oh yeah, I'll get your business on Facebook and we'll make all the friends in your community.
Thousands of followers.
Exactly. Yeah.
You won't have to work. You'll just get all the free
Yes.
customers.
Yes, more and more customers. They were the same people who fake Yelp reviews and things like that now. So I was really just upset by this entire progression of what I perceived as the extraction of wealth from a small business community. And so I started teaching the Digital Gunslingers, which was a $1 per person per head for an hour Twitter 101, Facebook 101, WordPress 101. And I would take the money and I donated it to the food bank because I figured I might need it at some point.
Right.
And then I was like, well, now that I know what I'm doing, I started reaching out to other contacts.
So how did you know what to do, though, just from these
Yeah, it was mostly like
2 years
personal
of being a
use.
struggling programmer?
Yeah, I mean,
No.
because as a programmer, you dive into the communities and they
Going in
have the
forums and
Reddit
different
yeah,
things,
exactly,
stuff
and
like that.
Facebook, and I would tweet a hashtag when I would go to a conference, and fellow developers would tweet me back and whatever else. And so there was a lot of just organic community building that I was doing across, and also I was the you would basically call it a marketing or production director, like an advertising director for the KCSU student radio station at CSU.
Yeah.
And so I was building all of the promo bumps and all the other marketing assets for the DJs. And I would make things for shows, and I would make, the commercials or the funny PSAs.
Which is kind of that identifier stuff that small businesses struggle with a lot of
Exactly.
times.
Yeah. And so I had a lot of that marketing skill that had just sort of grown organically through that as well.
Yeah.
And over time, I didn't really know it at first, but that WTF was like, internet vernacular. This is we're digital native, like we're working every day in this medium. Like this is the vernacular. And I had a client, there was only one client, who turned around and said, after we got all the way through like a long email discussion, all the way at the end of my contract, he looks at the contract and goes, "Is that the name of your business?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "What does it stand for?" I said, "Exactly what you think it does." He says, "Oh, well, I can't do business with you." Like, how do you? It was on my email address, my website. You had to go look through LinkedIn, like all of these references, like, and you didn't notice the name of the business. So that was the one guy in the entire. It was one of the biggest restaurants in Fort Collins, but one guy who would refuse to work with us,
Right.
and it became this filter for people who understood like internet vernacular.
Yeah.
And I had this really amazing mentor who told me, look, you're so upfront about things. You tell clients things that even if they will fire you, they know that it's the truth.
Yeah.
Right. And so they know it's the best advice you possibly have to offer. So your brand is unabashed honesty.
I don't. Maybe we talked about this. I don't think so though. But in my banking career, at one point in time, the bank was under distress. My boss got let go. I was the acting boss. I wasn't really interested in being the boss of the bank. Anyway, long story short, I didn't cut my hair. I was under a haircut strike. I was already pretty shaggy, and then I grew a ponytail. I went all the way to ponytail stage at like age 35.
Nice.
As I'm the acting president of Capital West National Bank.
Yeah.
And when I got a new boss finally, we worked together for a few months and stuff. And a couple months in, he was like, oh, because my picture was taken and it was on the front page of the BizWest magazine. And I'm like stretched out with my 5-finger shoes on and my hair like not in a ponytail. It was just shagging out because it was he's like, there's, I don't know how many, but 30%, maybe 40% of business owners in town that no matter how smart you are and how good at questions you ask and how good at rates you offer, that just won't be your customer because of your hair.
Yep.
And I was like, I can't be everybody's banker, and I wouldn't want to be the banker of somebody that would judge me that quickly anyway.
Right.
And then my hair started thinning out, and I can't go back. So I'm really glad of that time of ponytailing it for a year.
Self-discovery.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm curious, you never dove into the mullet territory?
I did not. I really
Okay.
thought about going hard mullet, like as I departed the long hair, and I chickened out.
It should have been.
I'm not scared of much, but I am scared of mullets.
You know, it's a future Halloween costume for you. Alternate identity discovery, I think.
Well, I do wear mullets for Halloween costumes
There you
from
go.
time to time. I just haven't ever had the boldness to take it on myself.
That's awesome.
So it just kind of started organically. Were you like working for other people and stuff? Or were you just kind of piecing it together, bootstrapping it?
Yeah. Well, so
who did you start charging money to other than like $1 to learn about stuff?
yeah. So I had bootstrapping is an interesting phraseology because I think that that's how 90% of most small businesses operate or should operate anyway, because when you start seeking out external funding or venture capital or anything else like that, there's so much expectation
And it's hard.
yes, there's so much emotional weight to all of that as well. But when I started, I had just left my second to last job as a programmer. I was about to start my last job as a programmer, and I had to have an emergency appendectomy. And the doc looks at me after the surgery and says, "What are you doing with your life? You should not be this stressed out that you don't know the signals of your own body. Like, you should have come into the hospital a lot sooner. Like, you should have had this taken care of. Like, what's happening with you?" And so I didn't have a good answer for that. He said, "Well, you need to think about what you're doing."
Thank you, doctor.
Yes.
I mean, really, because a lot of doctors today wouldn't give you that much time.
Right, exactly. And so I recovered slowly, and I knew about the time when my boss asked me, I was like, "Well, when are you going to be able to wear pants again?" Because I had a shark bite, right? So you can't wear belts, you can't wear tight clothing, you have to be full on sweats, and that was it. And I knew I was going to get fired. So I pulled my 401k from all the various jobs that I had. I paid off a little bit of my medical debt. I paid off a month of rent and a month of groceries, and that was my runway.
Wow.
And then I started building websites for $350. And I had one client who was...
Is this early days before the tools and stuff? Or?
No, this was... We had... there was
when was
Acorn
this,
and
by
some
the
of
way?
those other CSS editor. And so this was 2009.
Okay.
And $350 for a website is nothing.
No.
Right? Even then, it was nothing. You would still pay about 10 times that for...
Yeah.
This was fully custom
I mean,
WordPress
a couple
theme.
grand for a affordable website.
Yeah.
There's been people that have said they could build $700 websites and stuff, and
No way.
they're terrible
Yeah.
usually,
Exactly. No, this was fully custom WordPress, full-on theme, graphic
So you made
design.
$8 an hour.
Oh, yeah. It was
after
nothing.
$6 an hour.
You'd get a website and you're like, all right, I've got a third of my rent. I've got a third of my groceries. And now it would be I've got a tenth of my rent.
Right.
But yeah, that was my runway. And Lori Maycomer, who used to run
Yeah.
Blue Skies Marketing here
Oh,
in
she
Fort Collins.
doesn't anymore? She
moved.
retired?
Yeah, she moved.
Oh, she moved away.
She handed it off.
Okay.
And so she was one of my early on mentors, Ron Zazdinsky, who runs CodeGeek.net.
Yeah.
And they, at the time, had operated a speaking event called Ignite Fort Collins.
Yeah.
And so they invited me to be one of their first speakers at the very first Ignite Fort Collins. And I, of course, pitched the not having any
Why did they
speaking
invite
experience.
you?
Well, they had this great...
They just liked you?
on social media, they had this great... On Twitter in particular, it was... We're waiting in line for tickets for Ignite Fort Collins. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting thing. And it was pictures of people waiting in lawn chairs out throughout Old Town.
Okay.
And it just caught my attention as being this, and the social media side of me was like, this is
You
really
actually caught
fascinating.
attention.
Yeah. And so I leaned in, I said, I want to submit a talk to this. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I submitted a talk, and of course it was totally self-promotional, and they turned around and said, no, what if you did this instead?
Right.
And talked about this.
If you
'cause you're
actually
doing
added
this.
value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was such a kind moment of course correction.
Yeah.
And then also of sending the elevator back down for a newbie entrepreneur who they just felt like it was okay to take a risk on.
Yeah.
And so I went up there and I gave my talk. It's still out there on YouTube. And I talked about how social media was this Wild West wasteland, essentially, where we had to make the value that we wanted to see. And we had to treat each other with respect and bring the kindness, because there weren't filters and there aren't these other things. So, history repeats itself, obviously, but we were sitting there and Lori came up to me afterwards and she said, I want you to write content because what you just spoke about here was really, and knowing that
was
I
leading
was
edge at the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I had been self-promotional right up until like a week before the event, and that I had turned it around into this like well-received talk.
Yeah.
And they said, well, you should write content. And so Lori hired me to write content for a website.
Okay.
And one of the clients that I had worked on was Jim Davidson.
She charged more than $350, I assume.
she taught me how to price myself well. And that's the story of like most of my business journey was I had all of these amazing mentors, most of them women entrepreneurs who came out of the woodwork of some sort of networking relationship or some other, thing that I had done or a project or saw that I was working on something, and it helped me level up my game over time.
That's cool.
And so I like that spirit of give first, and then we know that a newbie entrepreneur is not going to be at the same level of productivity or focus or whatever else. Their game's not going to be as high as somebody who's been established for 10, 15, 20 years. And so that grace allowed me to really level up my game in an organic way and to find my focus without having to hustle for every single dollar, essentially.
Right. Well, and imagine if you're like, yes, if you've got some great tech or something, you can be a funded startup, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. But for the most part, you can't charge a lot for your stuff because you aren't good enough at it.
And the one thing I really took with me as teaching is the critical way to show your value. And so I carried that forward into like e-learning and different platforms, and I launched a Skillshare course for a little while there, and it funded quite a few things that I wanted to do. But when I was doing it as Digital Gunslingers, it proved efficacy. And so our community realized I knew what I was talking about because it was vetting out in practice.
Yep.
And one of the things I'm most proud of is that the folks who were attending that class went on to start up their own social media, their own marketing consultancies, their own like content creation. They did it in their own ways. And it was amazing to see that sort of response from the community of like, they came out, they learned about WordPress, they set up their website, they learned about business, and they shared it out with the community, and it was valuable.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know the motto at LoCo Think Tank, by the way?
No, what's that?
It's ask of your needs and share of your abundance.
Nice.
And I feel like it kind of speaks toward your kind of persona and the way that you approach community.
Yeah, absolutely. Give first is how, and Startup Week, we were a big part of Techstars for a while there, and they said, give first. That's a give first mentality.
Yeah,
give back.
yeah.
So, by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs is how we phrase it.
I like it.
So,
I like it. That's the same theme with Startup Week now still, right?
Yeah.
Like, why has everybody, like, there's Made in Loveland and Founded in FoCo, and there was this and that, whatever, and it used to all be co-branded as Startup Week.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well, Denver's still Startup Week.
Okay.
And they are.
But it was
their
like
own...
Techstars was like a whole thing, right?
Yeah. As gently as I can put this, I
fucked it all up.
I have a personal issue with licensing organizations. So I used to run TEDx FoCo, and we got three programs deep into that, right? So we had 3 events. The last one was spectacular. It was at Avogadro's Number. We had amazing speakers, great videography, amazing lighting, good scenery design.
Yeah.
It was a packed room, so that entire like stage area of Avogadro's Number was completely packed. And I got a phone call after we had uploaded our talks from somebody at TEDx, and they said, "Hey, I'm your liaison, and I just wanted to ask you, like, your talks seem really folksy," and that was the word they used, folksy. And I was like, well, what does that mean? Exactly. Like, have you been to Fort Collins? Like, have you seen our people? Like, this is what we... And so the entire premise of that was I wanted to give an environment where our community could have a large platform. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And folks that nobody had ever seen or heard from or, knew about, but they had excellent things to say. And it was sending that elevator back down, right? To give them that TEDx space. And they're
like, we're looking for a little more polish.
Right? Aren't you just like north of Denver? Can't you get like, I was like, no, this is our community. And so I pumped the brakes hard on that.
Well, there's some amazing speakers and some TEDx speakers from around here that they're lucky they had them.
This is true. Yeah.
But you kind of misread the room a little bit. Sounds like.
So I
well,
pumped
the
brakes
elevator
on
had
that.
been sent down for you. You're like,
Yes.
here.
Yeah. And so I turned around and I looked around at the like TEDx CSU and TEDx Front Range, which was a thing back then, and I started advising on their boards to like, okay, this is how we did what we did, and TEDx CSU is still around, and they,
good.
CSU is the license holder for that, but it's a student organization that runs it, which is just the best way to do it. And with all of these things, they're labors of love, so you can't charge for it, you can't make money off of
Like
it.
a podcast.
So many things.
Basically.
By the way, here's the collection tin sound.
Right. Yeah, if you want to sponsor the LoCo
That's
experience, send an email to Kurt at LoCo Think Tank. We'll get there.
Payment accepted in coffee, whiskey.
Right, whatever.
Hot sauce.
Yeah, hot sauce is good.
But yeah, and so I, coming back to Techstars, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I'm going off on these tangents.
No,
big stories.
I'm a squirrel chaser.
Yes. So the issue with Techstars was that they became really onerous with their branding. And first, and this was for years, they had said, well, you can't be Startup FoCo, which was our domain, startupfoco.com.
Yeah.
And you can't be Startup FoCo. You have to be Techstars, Startup Week, Fort Collins.
Right.
And that
Feed
was your
everything through our website.
And so you had to have, so we bought all the massive branding with their updated logo and everything else like that. All the banners were changed and all the rest of the website expense to do all of this stuff. And then they changed their logo, and they have the underscore thing now. And so then they were like, you have to come into compliance with our new branding standards, and we'll give you 1 year to do it. I said, well, are you going to give us like the $5,000 to,
right.
make the new banners?
And
that we
were they
just paid for?
charging you to be part of their thing?
No, they didn't charge for it. But when they became you must do this,
Yeah.
and or else we won't license you. It's like, okay, well,
So basically, we're not connected to the greater Techstars system.
No.
In a way.
no, and
Which means we have to home grow our own speakers and presenters. Because I guess maybe one difference is when it was Techstars, they would bring some kind of baller speakers out and stuff like that.
sometimes.
But the cool thing is
yeah.
we have some really great speakers here. Like
Yes.
people that are really awesome that choose to live in Fort Collins because it's a choice city.
Yes.
And they probably won't even charge as much as Techstars was paying because they just want to talk to the local community and help them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Help send the elevator down.
Right. We don't pay any of our speakers. It's still that give first mentality. We might, if we need to fly somebody in, we'll pay for their flight
Right.
and their accommodations, but we don't pay any of the speakers to just appear.
Yeah, interesting.
And so it's very much that who in the local market has something to share, that wants to share something and can share something and is in a position to share something.
I haven't heard back about my application yet.
Yes. You're in. As of the email, I was working on it right before we did the podcast, and I was like, "Oh, I've got to go to Kurt. I'm going to be late." So yes, you're in.
Okay.
But yes, the whole concept of give first and now we're founded in FoCo, and you mentioned Made in Loveland Week.
Yeah.
They had a similar.
They
experience.
moved first, kind of on that. Even
Longmont
I think,
had a
right?
similar.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
just this entire. Everybody kind of felt icky about the branding, and that's as kind as I
So
can
basically,
put it. Just-
Techstars crashed their brand in some ways. I mean, I can't
yeah.
assume that Northern Colorado is the only region of the country that was kind of like, here's what I think about all your new requirements.
I as much as they're a good team. Brad Feld and all of the folks set them up for a lot of success. Brad actually came up and
Yeah, Brad's
talked-
local, right?
No,
he's
he's
Boulder,
Boulder,
guy,
yeah.
but
Boulder is quote unquote a long way away, and it was tough to get official support from.
Yeah.
So we didn't, outside of I think one of our events, we didn't have much in the way of hey, here's some support to do a thing. Outside of Sketch, which became not a thing, and they tried to wrap the. Yeah,
right,
there was a lot of
apps
weird.
became so advanced after just a short while
Yeah.
that they couldn't expect that to be a value
Yeah.
add. It's just hey, here's.
And then they tried to roll their own community, which I think it's a really valuable thing if you're far away from the hub of Boulder.
Right.
And if you wanted to connect your entrepreneurs in that way. But we have in Fort Collins, we have 1 Million Cups. We
Right.
have,
You know who the entrepreneurial communities are
exactly.
out
we
here.
have LoCo Think Tank. And so what they were trying to do was pull folks into a network, it just didn't fit well for us.
Yeah,
It just wasn't a good fit. Like,
Well, and for me, it seemed like super attractive because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, there's this Techstars thing. I went down to the Longmont event, once
Yeah.
to Boulder even, actually.
Yeah.
And, never did succeed in scaling LoCo Think Tank geographically.
yeah,
We still will eventually, but we're taking a different tact.
yeah,
And it just was, it's hard to build relationships with even a week-long event,
yes,
right? Like the relationships that Fort Collins businesses are with one another.
yeah,
And so it's not just going to be like captive and contained in this 1 week event each year. That can be a catalyst for relationship building, which is,
right.
you guys, and I know the SBDC has been a big advocate and supporter of
Yep.
the startup week and whatever. So
Yeah, and it started with Mike O'Connell when he was at the
Mm-hmm.
SBDC as the director, and now Hope Hartman is the director of the SBDC, and it's doing amazing things. And
yeah, Hope was just on a few weeks ago, actually.
yeah, I mean, just super talented and amazing programming for local entrepreneurs.
So I want to just say, who is Founded in FoCo Week for? Like, who should come? Who should block off that? Is it 1st through 3rd?
Yeah, it's the
that what I
first
heard?
through the third. So
Okay.
because we just did Founded in FoCo in September,
Right.
we're resetting our time.
We'd
frame
rather do
back
it in
to-
the spring.
Yeah.
We don't want to screw around with it in the fall.
Yeah, well, fall, there's so many different events. And this last time when we tried it was the Chamber had an expo, the
Right.
Talent Summit
There was a
came,
ladies' business thing
Yes.
about
And
that time.
Everybody was busy doing something.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we just didn't want to compound that time of year. And there's also Fort Collins Comic-Con, which was in August, right? So we're one event,
yeah.
massive event after another for the organizing team. We
Right.
just could not do it. So now we're back in March.
A little bit of pressure was like, Nick, you kind of spread yourself thin doing an
Yes.
August-September event.
Oh, yeah.
So
Wait, it's lesson learned.
whether it's outside pressure or inside pressure, I'm sure there's pressure.
Yeah. We
Well,
haven't perfected the cloning yet.
so who is that for? Like, is it for existing businesses, startup businesses, want to start up businesses, long time established but want to connect in the community more?
Sure. So Startup Week, that was the other component of that branding. It's usually like tech heavy and startup heavy and funding heavy, right? So Founded in FoCo is much more freelancers, solopreneurs, small business owners, nonprofits. We've got a nonprofit track. Creatives
Nice.
can get in on the business, and also the classes that are taught for creatives are taught by creatives. So artists have a very particular way about talking about business,
Yeah.
and they have a very particular way of understanding and relating to business concepts. And so you have to hear it. It helps to hear it from a fellow artist, right? In the same way as like, banking has compliance, right? So you have those really strict rules that you have to play, and you can't just like, I'm going to walk to a marketing talk because 90% of that will not be applicable to me. So it's in that same vein, the talks for the nonprofits led by nonprofit experts. And so we have 3 big, well-curated days of excellent business peer-to-peer programming. And so whether you're a freelancer, an established business that's looking to scale and grow profitability, or if you are a nonprofit, or if you are a solopreneur creative, you will find something of value at Founded in FoCo.
Yeah. So that was my big question. I think probably most of my listeners have established businesses. They've been going for a while and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have value adds for that?
For sure.
10-year established, longer than that even, very profitable already.
Yeah, we have Charles Fred, who's
good.
going to be coming
He's
to
a great
talk
speaker.
about scalability. We have an entire track that's dedicated specifically to scaling small to mid-sized businesses up to $1 million plus.
Nice.
So
Perfect.
you're looking to grow, those are the tracks.
Those
to go
really
to.
are rank and file at LoCo Think Tank. Really
Yeah.
our thinkers and builders chapters are all kind of in that space.
Exactly. And you're going to be the first to find out. The LoCo Think Tank coalition will be highlighted at the top of that day on Wednesday the 1st. So you'll be kicking off the entire day and leading right into the scale-up tracks.
I hope I'm free at that time. I hadn't heard from you.
We'll clear your schedule.
So I want to, before we get too far in that, is there anything else, I guess, people that are asking themselves already about fun? Do I have to pay anything?
No, it's
Can I just
totally
show
free.
up? Where's it at?
The event is totally free, and you can go to FoCo, foundedinfoco.com/schedule, and you can start building out a schedule right online.
Okay.
You can keep it with you on your device. You can carry it with you into the venue. All of the talks are free to attend. We will also have some events for networking that you can go to throughout. There's an exhibitor hall where you can explore and see just some different aspects of our community if you're looking for different resources or to connect with a different hub.
Yeah.
They are going to be there and promoting themselves.
Cool.
So, we also have a brain crawl.
Is it
which
still mostly at Front Range?
It's all at Front Range Community College.
Okay.
The wrap-up party will probably be at the Lyric. That's what we're working on right now.
fun.
Yeah.
Good.
So we also have a brain crawl. And brain crawl is a mental health resource fair for entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. And basically, if you're in the world of business and you have a hard time, winding down, or if you're neurodivergent, or if you're any of the above, like ADHD, or just buried in your business, these folks can help you find the resources for resiliency. And that's led by Krista Berry, who, runs She Leads.
Yep.
We have an excellent community of entrepreneurs who's on our
You should check out my
organizing community.
podcast with Mandy Mullen from recently, and she might even sponsor. Run Windsor is her business, and she's developed she's really passionate, and I'm not quite clear why yet, about mental health and especially suicide prevention and things like that. And so, she's your type of people, maybe.
That's awesome.
So,
And this is how Founded in Fort Collins really grows. Anything that we've done in the past has been very similar.
well, as long as I'm name dropping, Run Windsor has a 7-race series ranging from fun runs up to marathons. And the Wild West Relay is coming up next August. I'm looking for a few more runners.
Very cool.
You want to be in a 200-mile relay race with me?
Look, I can run a 5K really slowly.
Well, Mandy would say anybody can be a long-distance runner.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I love it. I have never tried to run longer than about 4 miles.
Okay.
So
Well,
if
we'll
you
stay in touch.
Yeah. Put me on the backup squad.
You're
Put me on
okay.
the bench.
Okay. So, like I was starting to say before, so great information on Founded in FoCo Week. Check it out at foundedinfoco.com.
That's right.
Google it. Even if you misspell it, you'll be able to find it and find all the schedule. There's a lot of great speakers. I'll be on the schedule somewhere, apparently.
Yes.
But before we learn more about WTF and Comic-Con and stuff, I want to know, where did Nick came from?
Yeah.
Are you from local? CSU was you, right?
Yeah, all
where we
around
started.
Colorado.
Okay.
So I went through Colorado Springs, Parker.
Where were you born?
I was born in Grand Junction.
And why did you move all around?
Mostly, my family had jobs going various places, and so they had family over in Grand Junction. They moved down to Colorado Springs, and my dad worked at Lockheed for a while.
Okay.
Which was Martin Marietta at the time, and was programming things, and we just moved around where there was good programming jobs.
Yeah.
So,
And that was what your dad's work was?
yeah.
It was computer programming?
Yeah, and
So he was an early adapter, obviously, because he's old enough to be your dad.
Exactly. So he was, when they were not quite at the punch card level. They moved beyond that, so he was programming in BASIC and things like that.
Yeah.
And would set things, logic books and C programming and all the rest of that in front of him. And then we moved over to what is now Park Meadows, essentially, and so I went to school around there, and then we moved to Parker, and that was
because he was successful in his programming well enough to buy a nice house in Parker when that was the cool thing to do. Yeah. Well, because Denver was getting kind of crowded comparably.
Exactly.
I love
that was the
Parker.
thing.
We lived in Colorado Springs for a while.
Nice.
And that back road, whatever that is, that goes from the Springs up through Black Forest and up to Parker and through Franktown and stuff.
Yeah.
Just really like that road.
It's a beautiful area of Colorado, and it's just super wide open. I go to Parker now to visit some friends, and it's just it's so packed in. They didn't have a Best Buy when I was growing up there, which was that was a big deal.
Well, but Denver's 27 minutes away or something.
Exactly. Well, do you remember Incredible Universe? There was a store that was right in Park Meadows.
I've never been a geek
on.
at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was the best. It was the best store ever. They had like lightsabers and giant trampolines, and they had. Do you remember Lou from Littleton, who was a radio personality on KOA? And he would do the Denver Broncos games, and he would cover the post.
No, I'm sorry.
I went to Incredible Universe, and he was on air for KOA.
Oh, wow.
And I went, and I was just a huge fan because I had listened to him all the time.
Right.
And so I went up and I said, "Hey, are you Lou from Littleton?" Yeah, absolutely. So we had a 5-minute conversation. He's like, "Yeah, your voice just went out on air to like 50,000 people in Denver." I was like, and so that, I think, was the moment
that led you to the CSU job.
Yes, exactly.
I just talked to one of my former members I just met with this afternoon, and he lives just around the corner from here.
Yeah.
And he said, I've actually seen you walking by a couple of times, so I figured your office was really close. I wasn't
funny.
quite sure where. But the reason I reconnected is I heard your voice. like I was apparently walking by with Alma or with Alicia to go have lunch in Old Town or something, was talking loud, and they're like, I heard that's Kurt.
That's funny.
So anyway,
I was, so, and I pick coffee shops sometimes based on where I know that folks will be, but Lima Coffee, actually, in Old Town, is one of my favorites now, and it's because my neighbor is the organizer of it. She's the owner of.
Oh, is she?
Yeah,
she needs to be a member of LoCo Think Tank. I think I'm so impressed with what she's built in such a short period of time.
Yes,
and she probably needs to do like multiple locations and stuff.
Yeah. Have you been to their Midtown location? It's right next to like Boomer Music and that the older Target.
Well, I know where Boomer. Did they take over the FoCo Coffee House?
No, FoCo Coffee House is still there. So they're just right up the street from.
Okay, no, I didn't know they had a second location. I knew they were in the mall before.
Yeah.
Is that it? No,
they're in the mall too. So
they got a third location now.
And
good
now
for them.
Town.
Yeah, no, I think that's a smart move.
And soon the moon. They're taking over the moon too.
My special talent isn't as identification of special talent.
Yes.
And the first time I walked into that place, I was like, somebody was pretty intentional about this. I never went to the mall one. Sorry, but when they opened downtown, I was like, oh, this place is pretty fun. And they've been busy basically since they opened.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for good reason, too. I mean, everything there is made with a ton of intentionality, a ton of attention to detail and care and consideration for the end user. They're seasonal drinks. You can get a flight of them, which I've never seen another coffee house do.
That's funny.
So you can actually experience all the great sugary drinks without having to go full on.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And commit to a 16 ounce.
That's the kind of thoughtful stuff. Maybe she doesn't need LoCo Think Tank. I don't know. But what I find usually is that the smarter people are, the more they realize how much they can benefit from connecting with other smart people.
For sure. Yeah.
So anyway, that's great to know. I'm proud of her.
Yeah.
So, and she's supposed to come on my podcast too. Amanda, if you're listening.
You're next. Tag.
Yeah, Diego is her husband?
Yeah. Amanda and Diego,
Yeah, they should be on.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
they're fantastic people. Really good neighbors also. They just,
Where did we jump off? We were in Parker, and then somehow we made it to the coffee shop.
Getting recognized in public places.
Oh, yes.
So,
yes.
And that was one of those, you can walk in and you see Wade Troxel, who I know has been on your podcast.
Oh, yeah. Wade's everywhere. I see him twice a week somewhere.
Isn't he great? So I just Wade and I ran for office not too long
ago. I remember.
I
actually wrote down a note right here to say, how about getting beat for city council by 40 votes or whatever it was?
It's 34 votes.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, it was the most fun marketing campaign I've ever run, and it was one of the best projects I've ever had, because most politicians
you must have spent a shitload though, right? Like you did a lot of little cards and stuff.
Yeah, it was expensive.
Yeah.
And
you basically spent 1 year's salary, but now city council gets a raise, right?
They get a raise.
Didn't that happen?
Yeah. So they do get a raise, and it's a really good thing for them because the amount of work that they put in, the amount of subcommittees and other things that they go into, especially if you are a counselor like Wade, right?
Right.
So Wade goes to literally everything. And we invited him to Comic-Con. We invited him to Startup Week. We invited him to, and he would show up. And he would show up to all the subsidiary events of Comic-Con, like our Kessel Run or 5K. He would show up to, anything that we asked him to, he was there. And so...
I think it's a mental condition that he has of some sort. He shows up for anything that anybody asks him for.
It's such a...
But thank you, Wade,
yes,
for being that guy.
If you're that, that figurehead of Fort Collins for as long as he was, you and still is he's recognizable. You want to talk to him about stuff.
Yeah.
So it's great to have that kind of access, and it was really instrumental. And my city council person when I first moved here was Bob Overbeck, who's now the assessor.
Yeah.
And he called you back. I sent him an email. He would call you back within 5 minutes of an email, and he would have a lengthy conversation with you about whatever it was that you just emailed him about. And it really stuck with me about local politics, that it just is about connecting with people.
Yeah.
And so, most politicians, they operate off of a list, right? So they even though it's nonpartisan, will affiliate with one party or the other. And they'll have a walk list where these addresses are maybe sympathetic. These addresses are like on the edge, and you can like maybe convert them and whatever else.
Right.
But this is where you'll get the
And
most
don't
bang
even
for
spend
your
your time over here.
Exactly, yeah. I didn't use any of that. I used Larimer County data, which most folks don't know. Your Larimer County voter data has an insane amount of information about you. And so when you get text messages from politicians, that's the source of the thing. And if
Wow,
you
just
ever,
right there.
Oh, yes. And if you ever donated money to a campaign anywhere, the parties have your everything as well.
Bastards.
It's and so
I donated $50 to Molly Scold. I
I'm-
think that's the only political donation just about I've made. No, Heidi Ganal, I donated $100 or $200 to her.
well, there you go.
Yeah.
And so
Because she came on my podcast. I mean, that was kind of her.
yeah, I mean, right? So you
I'm not paying you nothing, though.
no, I don't, it's not asking for
Well, if you run again, I might donate. but
Right.
yeah.
But that's the thing is that I'm unaffiliated, and so I didn't have support from official parties. Like,
Yeah.
some of the folks wouldn't even talk to me about things, and so but I had this list of neighbors, and I was like, I'm not going to mess with it. I'm just going to go door to door to every single house in Fort Collins that I'm allowed to knock on and talk to my neighbors, and I knock on their door. The most common question I would get is, "What party are you?" I say, well, I'm a huge Trekkie. Does that help you? Like,
funny.
I believe in the like Gene Roddenberry future. Like everything's working out. We've got great science. Like everybody's healthy, and we can get there by hard work, right? And I'm a business owner, which usually sent them for a loop as well. But ultimately, we would get to a point of talking about party to tell me about what issues you are concerned about. What are you interested in? What are you curious about? And what do you want to see fixed? And I would just take notes. And as they were talking, I would write it down and say, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll get back to you. Or, oh, you might want to talk to these people in neighborhood services or whatever else.
Yeah.
And so I did that with every single door in Fort Collins that was in District 1. And that's one of the reasons why I came in so close.
Yeah.
At the end of the campaign, when it was clear that, and this was right after January 6th, right? And so there was a lot of concern about the process, right? Because the city of Fort Collins holds back 10% of the votes so that they can hide the identities of the folks that are voting overseas, right?
Oh, right.
And how they voted. Because if you don't, and there's 3 voters and they all vote for your opponent, then you know who voted for your opponent, and it's not privacy, right?
I guess.
So they obfuscate that with this holding back 10%. And so when it was clear that I was down by X number of votes, I said, well, here's what the process is, because I had to learn from the city clerk's office what the process was. And a lot of folks were, why aren't you conceding? Why aren't you conceding? And I'm like, well, it's not time for that yet. It's time for this. Like, we're going to give the office time to do their work. And we trust the clerk's office to do their job. And so they did. And when it came back and we were 34 down, I called Susan Gutowski, who's District 1, and we had a conversation about what I had learned and what I heard from folks around, and I had these 8 pages of notes, and I sent it to Susan, and I sent it to every elected council member, and I said, here's what's important to the people in District 1. Every single door I knocked on, this is what they said. And here's the neighborhoods where they said it. Here's what the parks and here's all of the data. Like, please use this. And so then offline, I could also go through, and now I'm on the Parks and Rec board, and I'm part of my HOA board, and I'm all of these other things where I can sort of help.
You crave power, huh?
No, no.
Parks and Rec board. That's pretty.
I mean, it's really.
Sorry.
Let me adjust the mower settings or something. No, I wanted to go where I could be most useful, right? And so my
But then those were
key
some of your
areas of
causes.
passion.
I remember, like like sidewalks and
yep.
walkways and green spaces. And...
bike lanes, sidewalks, and trails constantly. And it's because in District 1 in Fort Collins, Northeast Fort Collins, we have no connected bike lanes, sidewalks, trails to the rest of Fort Collins.
Yeah.
And it is a huge equity issue because you cannot get working parents, their kids to a recreation center. They can't go on their own. They can't connect to a different park. They can't play with their friends in a different neighborhood.
Right.
They cannot go anywhere safely to school without driving.
Interesting.
And it is the most frustrating because what you see is you're creating a commuter community, right?
Yeah.
Where they will...
Obligatory,
yes,
even.
They put their head down to sleep, and then they go somewhere else. And there is no sales tax revenue from that. There is no investment in the properties because of that. And so you just lose out as a community. And so I've worked really hard as a HOA board member, as just a community member to okay, look, we're going to do a public art piece. And we have the largest mural. It was a $25,000 art project. We have the longest mural in Fort Collins, in Northeast Fort Collins, as a result of art in public
Where's
places.
That?
The Richards Lake Underpass.
Oh, cool.
Which is right on Turnberry and Richards Lake.
Yep.
If you, not a lot of people have a reason to go out to Northeast Fort Collins except for Budweiser.
Right.
So if you have a reason, you stay there. You can or friends, you can go and visit this Richards Lake Underpass, which has, it's called the Vibrant Forest. It's by artist Kristen Vos, and it is the longest mural. It's 190 feet long.
Wow.
It was painted cooperatively with the community. So 60 neighbors came out and helped paint this, like a paint by numbers thing.
Yeah.
And then Kristen went in and added the details in, fine details.
Oh, that's cool. That makes me feel less like that was a giant waste of taxpayer money.
It's a beautiful.
I'm a libertarian.
No, I totally get it.
And I love beautiful things,
yes.
and so and actually that's the way they did that to make it a leveraged project and not just some fancy artist guy making $300 an hour while he does stuff.
Exactly. And so there was a contest. We had a coloring page for kids.
Cool. I like
and
it.
all of the kids got to come out and see that art is a viable thing that you can do in the community because there's art in public places. There's these mural programs. And
there's going to be a lot more people in Northeast Fort Collins, not too far away.
Yeah.
I'm actually, I just called back Max Moss today.
Yeah. And Max is interesting, isn't he?
I think he's I barely know him. I met him a little bit, and I called him out of the blue the other day and said, hey, I think you should probably be on my podcast and maybe in one of my think tanks or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But because that's going to be city of Fort Collins, right?
Yeah. So Montava, which is right next to Budweiser.
Right.
There's this entire portion of Northeast Fort Collins called the Mountain Vista sub area.
Yeah.
And Mountain Vista is the road that goes to I-25 right next to Budweiser. Okay. So PSD owns land out there. And theirs was right up against the Storybook neighborhood, which is, Adriel Hills has the golf club. Storybook is just to the north and the east of that, toward Budweiser. And so there's all of these different sub-communities going in. And for residents who have been there, there are two roads in and out of town. Timberline, right. Which crosses at Vine over a railroad. And then there's also, which is all sorts of obnoxious.
Yes, it backs up way far sometimes.
Yes. And now there's Mosaic, which is completed out there as well.
Oh.
And there is no escape from that neighborhood to any of the other neighborhoods.
Right.
With a bike.
So if you want to go to the I-25, you're great.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just kind of stuck.
Commuter communities. And then you have, on the other end, Hearthfire... Or not Hearthfire, but Water's Edge. Yeah, Water's Edge, Trailhead.
But the critical mass of Montava will make it so there has to be trails connecting and stuff, no?
Theoretically, if the city decides to lean in and make that a priority.
Yeah, I mean, it'll cost money.
Yes, and
But if that could hook to Pooter Trail?
Yeah. And it should, because our neighborhood, the trail that runs through our neighborhood is Pooter Trail.
Right.
Richards Lake Underpass is Pooter Trail. And they're all supposed to interconnect. And Montava will have a trail connection in.
Cool.
Now, whether or not they can connect down further relies on PSD, and this is the issue with Northeast Fort Collins, that when you see things come up about studies like, the master plan is being updated, lean in and comment, because you know stuff about your neighborhood that they don't know.
The planners just don't know.
Yeah, because they can't be everywhere.
Right.
Right. And they know what their section of town looks like, and they know what their staff's section of town looks like.
Right.
Which is fair, but that's why they ask for us to lean in and do those things. So the trail networks and being connected in relies heavily on developers to do the thing, to connect the dots.
So those are the things that you're passionate about.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously.
And the city has to sort of guide that process to say, you should really connect this here because then you can connect over here and you can do these things. And, they right next to Ginger Graham's property with
at LeMay and
the LeMay overpass.
Vine or whatever.
Yeah. They did this brilliant thing with the bike lane underpass, which goes right underneath LeMay. It's a grade separated crossing, so you don't have to get off your bike. You don't have to cross in front of traffic. There's no 40-mile-an-hour traffic coming at you. And these are things that we don't have in Northeast Fort Collins.
Right.
But soon, if like Suniga comes and connects over on through,
right.
which it should eventually, there's going to be those grade separated
crossings.
crossings.
Well, and there's going to be enough traffic that if there isn't, it'll be mayhem.
Yes.
So.
Yes, and there already is because everything goes down. Everything goes down Country Club Road, and it's those are county neighborhoods, so they don't have representation in the city.
Yeah,
and that is a huge frustration for them. And so even during
they're counting on District 1 kind of to like represent their interests a little bit too.
And so District 1, to give you a sense of scope, includes Old Town, by the way, and next to Cow Country, where I live, Budweiser. It goes all the way from Hearthfire up in right next to the
Terry Lake,
dairy farm, Terry Lake. Yeah, so all the way down to the Timberline King Supers. And I mean, it's, right? And all the way across to Old Town and all the way out to I-25.
Well, it's so diverse.
And then there's even a neighborhood across I-25, which is included in District 1.
Nice.
It's like, how do you plan for Old Town, which is almost all of the sales tax revenue in District 1.
Right.
And for most parts, like 30 to 40% of the city's sales tax revenues centered in and around Old Town.
Yeah.
And also, Cow Country.
Right.
At the same time. It's an impossible job.
To both.
Yeah. And so when like Susan and I have a lot of respect for each other. We connect a lot. And it's, you can't be too hard on any particular city council member, but like in District 1 in particular, because it's so wide, it's just such a hard position to hold and to keep everybody happy. Because Susan's neighborhood, right next to Adora, right next to 3 different grocery stores that she can bike to.
Right, it's all good. She doesn't need more money for sidewalks and stuff.
Exactly. And so that the pedestrian safety is the key concern for those neighborhoods down there. They want to make sure their pedestrians are safe, that there's like, separated crossings and all these other things. And you see that in the investments.
I feel like we're at risk of revisiting your failed city council election here. So I want to bring us back. So basically, but give me your family dynamic just a little bit as you're growing up in Parker and Park Meadows area and stuff. You have brothers, sisters? Are you the oldest, youngest?
Only child.
Only child.
Yep.
And what was your mom up to?
She was a stay-at-home mom, and she loved to craft, and she loved to just make new recipes and visit family and all that stuff. And
all right. And so you're just first and only son of a computer nerd pioneer, and came up here to extend the legacy.
Yeah, well,
and you have.
I was, as I said, was the world's worst programmer. They paid me to stop.
Fair.
But they
Well, but there's understanding, right? Like that's
true.
Like Alma here, you just met a little bit ago. She's 20, but she just understands a lot of things about how computers and softwares and interfaces work that are really hard for me.
Yeah, this is true. You do have an intrinsic knowledge of computers,
right? Yeah. Yeah, because you're not 40, you're 37 or something, I suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I'm 48. I'm full 10 years plus.
Yeah.
And so like when we got cell phones, it was like, hey, my first phone, and whatever, and an email address that could just be your name and stuff.
Big deal.
Which is much different for you. Yeah. You were both 10 years later, but also in a leading edge family at the time, right?
Yeah, we always had the latest gadget, the latest whatever. I didn't have the first gen iPhone, but like the second gen iPhone, and it wasn't a brick. And it was one of those things that I knew it was not something that everybody else had access to. And so I was really mindful about that when it came time to like, okay, well, what do I do with my skills? What can I do with this? And Facebook, interestingly enough, just before starting the Digital Gunslingers, I taught a $70 per person Facebook 101 class, basically. Facebook for business owners.
Yeah.
And felt so icky about it because of who showed up. And it was like these like 60 plus female entrepreneurs.
Wow.
Right. And I was like, this is a literacy skill, right? It's just as much a literacy skill as reading, typing, writing your own name. Like, y'all need to know how to use Facebook, and I should not be charging you $70 per class to teach you this. And so I
Well, did you add more than that in value, though?
Well, yeah.
I mean, literacy is worth a lot.
Yes. But public school is free.
I know,
but
but
the libertarian in you is like, come on.
hell.
I
And
also
apparently you're a chick magnet.
I am not really, but my first key, I do have a good voice for radio, and podcasts. My first couple of clients were very much in that female 60+ demographic.
Oh, right.
And I think that's just how like Fort Collins sort of shook out, and they were willing to invest in you know a newbie entrepreneur and willing to who seemed to know what he was talking about, and I did, but added a lot of value
because you knew things
over
that they didn't know. They knew a lot of
Exactly.
things that you did,
Yeah.
or vice versa, right?
Yeah. And very willing to teach so that
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
like, okay, check this out. Here's where you need to go.
Right.
And that was a key. Like I would
Well, it was a
teach my
win-win.
clients. Right.
You like they would teach you, and you would teach them at the same time.
Right. And it was awesome having that access to those learning opportunities, because anytime in any business that you have access to, Fort Collins Brewery was one of my first clients.
Really?
Yes. And so, Tom, who was Major Tom,
Yep.
Tom Peters, and their entire family, and Jan Peters, and then Tina, who took over
Yeah,
the
yeah,
restaurant,
yeah,
did
yeah.
Gravity 1020. It was such a dynamic family that you could just learn no matter what you went in there. Like, you could go in there for like, hey, let's do a label preview, and you would come out with 5 different marketing ideas.
Right.
So, I owe a lot of my growth to just the entrepreneurs that were around me. And
Yeah.
so I try to keep that spirit going.
I like that. A lot of times marketing people treat their customers as people that can learn from them only.
Yeah.
And like recognizing your customers as people that you can also learn from. That speaks a lot. I want to cover some stuff about Comic-Con.
Yeah.
A little bit more about what WTF is doing in the future, and then talk about this hot sauce, but I want to do it after a break. Is that
Sure.
cool? Okay, let's do it. The LoCo Experience is sponsored by InMotion, providing next-day delivery for local businesses. If you need anything delivered in northern Colorado, InMotion's flat fee service is a great resource for your business. Delivering from the Wyoming border to Denver and anywhere in between, their clients range from small breweries to real estate companies. InMotion can deliver almost anything you can imagine. If this fits a need for your business, contact InMotion directly by emailing them at inmotionnoco@gmail.com. That's inmotionnoco@gmail.com, and mention you heard it on the LoCo Experience. And we're back. So we were going to talk about, I think, where all this fits together. Like, WTF Marketing has kind of been, have you always been, are you a one-man band? Do you subcontract? Do you have employees?
Yeah, I subcontract quite a bit.
Okay.
I did have employees at one point, and it just is not something that I wanted to continue doing. You get these weird, like, you have to have something for them to do all the time, and
Right.
if you hit a slow spot in your business,
Right.
then okay, well, I still want to pay you and do the thing, because I don't want to lose this talent that we've curated and the working rapport. And so I just, freelancing is notoriously kind of fickle.
Yeah.
And even when I had like a good solid base of clients, I would have these moments of like, oh, well, we have this massive expense, but I also have this employee, and I can either choose to resource them or I can fix the expense. And so subcontracting became a much easier ask.
Yeah.
And so that's where and then, you have your reign of like whoever you want to choose to
right.
work with.
And that you can find just the right fit
Yeah.
and whatever.
And if somebody's like, oh, my passion area is no longer graphic design, cool, no biggie. Like, let me introduce you to 5 other graphic designers that I know,
Right.
and you can continue working.
So where would you say your special value add, and who are the best clients for you without doing a commercial?
Yeah, I really I really enjoy working with nonprofits.
Okay.
And in particular, I like understanding nonprofits that are seeking to grow better relations with their donors or seeking to grow a new donor market that they're looking at. And also just businesses that have a defined product base, like they know who their customers are,
Okay.
and they need to find more of them. And they need to honor them in a new way or get them re-engaged, right? So customers that are sort of like...
Which kind of resonates with that nonprofit thing, right? Because they know who their donors are, obviously.
Exactly.
They
and
gave
you
us
still
money.
have to get them to recur.
Yeah.
The businesses that struggle mightily, in my opinion, are and that I can help best are the ones that are they haven't identified what their value is, right? So the food bank, if you give the food bank $1, they turn that into 4 meals.
Right.
Easy, 1-to-1.
I
I
wish I could
give
do
you
that for
$1,
me.
4 meals. Right? It might not be 4 meals for you.
No, I could turn $40 into 3 meals if I
Right?
want to.
Exactly. They have that leverage. So that leverage is their entire value. Now you can say what you want about the rest of the story, right? That they make sure that there's no kids hungry in our community, that they provide lunches, and that they work with all these different food, shelters and all the rest of that stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful stories. The ultimate business value of them is the $1.
And for a certain
into 4
amount of their
meals.
donors,
Yes.
if they take $1 and turn it into 4 meals, that's worth supporting them.
Exactly. And then you get the halo effect as a donor. You say, oh, well, with Digital Gunslingers, we donated $5,000 over 4 years, and so we know what
This
the
will be
impact of that
20,000
is.
meals.
Exactly. And so when businesses aren't that clear about what their value proposition is, that's where I can step in and say, oh, well, let's turn this number, whatever this is. When somebody gives you $1, what is it that happens?
Okay. Fair. I like it. And like, is it steady as she goes for WTF marketing? Like, just need a few of those. I'm imagining frankly, like 5 or 10 clients at a time is probably all that you can process, maybe 20 or something, but not like a huge book, right?
No, it's not. We don't have a ton of throughput. We have a lot of recurring. And so we do.
So you're not
like,
marketing that often for yourself. A lot of times you're just like, I got kind of the right number of customers. I stay busy.
Honestly, I'm the way I market myself is through various events and happenings that I can help put on, like Comic-Con. I mean, I don't get paid for Comic-Con. I don't get paid for Founded in FoCo. I don't get paid for Brain Change or any of the other stuff that we.
You making any money in your hot sauce company yet?
It pays for itself.
That's good.
So it covers its expenses, and theoretically
Better than Comic-Con.
Right. It's 100% volunteer efforts, and you will always. The thing about Comic-Con is it's such a tight-knit community, and there was a geek presence in Fort Collins before we started Comic-Con.
Yeah, for sure.
And they would travel down to Denver.
I'm kind of geeky, honestly.
See, you said you're not a geek. I'm not a geek.
I'm not an out of closet geek.
Yes.
I'm a little geeky.
Just have to pull it out of you one podcast at a time.
But
what are you binging on Netflix right now, or Hulu?
I just got done watching Rings of Power or Ring of Power or whatever it is. So yeah, that's kind of nerdy or geeky or whatever. Not nerdy. I'm more geeky than nerdy for sure. But I love Star Wars because you were talking about some of the things that you love. I was like, oh shit, I love all that too.
Star Wars, The Mandalorian. It's game changer. I mean, Book of Boba Fett. They've got all of the. I mean, what do you even do with the universe as vast as Star Wars besides tell a very specific storyline that can last 1 or 2 season arcs,
right?
And then make every fan either really happy or really mad.
Yes,
it's the golden age of Star Wars. It was for a while there the golden age of Trek, and now I think that's maybe coming back a little bit with Paramount Plus. And
isn't that wild how big the vision of the original creators of Star Wars was? That there's room. like Fast and the Furious 9, you're like, I think you've run out of material, guys. But in some ways, the 6 episodes of Star Wars were just enough structure to build a whole ecosystem around.
Yeah. And they were really smart about how they turned over content creation to fans, right? So you want to talk about like customer-driven content creation. That is one of the premier examples. Now, Paramount, CBS, did it wrong, right? Because they were like, no, you cannot. We will sue you into the ground. And then they turned around and they were like, well, maybe we won't. We'll actually give you some leeway to do this thing.
Right.
And you can make...
We'll let you know when you've crossed the line.
2 standalone episodes. If you spend more than $1 million on your 2 standalone TV episodes, you're done.
Right.
You can't crowdfund more than that. But Star Wars was always you could fundraise, you could do whatever, you could tell whatever stories, as long as you did not make a profit. Right?
Okay.
You could not turn a profit, but you could pay your actors, you could pay your fans, whatever else. Like you could make swag, you could do things.
Yeah.
Then they actually turn around and license the 501st, the Stormtroopers, right?
Okay.
The cosplayers. And they made sure that they had proper licensing and all the rest of that stuff, that they could go out and do events. They couldn't get paid for it, but they could,
Wow, you're deep in this.
Yeah.
I feel like we could nerd out on that for a while, but I don't know
sure.
anything, and most of my listeners don't really care at all.
Well, what's interesting is there's a local company that produces props for those shows.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Who's that?
It's Far Away Creations.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they do all sorts of really cool stuff. They show up to cons and show off like replica props and things
Really?
like that. Yeah. And so they advise on different cool stuff.
Oh, that's
happens
awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me about Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Like, how long you been involved? What is it really for, like, the uninitiated?
Yeah.
And why do you carry this significant? I guess it's marketing for WTF in a way, but it's a labor of love.
Yeah. No. I have always wanted to have a local convention because, like I said, before Fort
There
Collins
were
Comic-Con,
underground nerds and geeks, and you wanted to bring them out.
the Geeks Come Out at Night was one of the events that happened back in the day, and it was 60 plus.
You
nerds
weren't
in a room.
related to the Geeks Who Drink trivia series around?
No,
Oh, okay.
that's a separate.
Seems like something you could have created.
Right. So we geeks like me would drive down to Denver,
Yeah.
spend $250 on a hotel room,
Right.
spend $150 on the tickets to get in, spend X number of dollars on art if we could, and food and whatever
If you
else.
still had some left.
Yeah. And this is too much. And so Tony Raymond, who was the head of the Colorado TSA at the time, and I were good friends. We have an audio drama Star Trek podcast,
Okay.
which is one of the most popular around. 60,000 downloads a month. But
Nice.
yes, and so it was one of those, like, we knew there were geeks in Fort Collins because we could see it on the stats.
Yeah.
And also, I knew that there were geeks because I could see them doing things like there was Griffin Games and Comics. We had all these comic
What's the
book
name of that
stores.
podcast, by the way?
It's called Outpost, a Star Trek fan production. Fan
Okay.
audio production.
All right.
StarTrekOutpost.com.
Yeah. I'll find it.
And so this will play embarrassing clips from my voice acting.
Okay. We'll do.
There's this idea of doing a con was sort of just like off in the wind. And so back in the day, Nate Scott, who ran the Fort Collins Zombie Crawl.
I know Nathan.
Yeah. And he had this great following. And so I was working with the Poudre River Public Library District at the time, and the communications director had said, we just lost our building, which became the Butterfly Cafe.
Right.
We just lost our building to hold our books for our annual book sale.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be out, however much to do this annual book sale because we can't do it this year.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So Nate came in, and I got together with Paula Watson-Lackamp, who was the communications director, and we said, what can we do? Can we run a con? Like, sure. So we said, where can we hold it? Aslan Center.
Right.
So we put it at the Aslan Center. It was
Right.
a one-day event. We're like, this
For
is either
$1
gonna be-
rent.
Exactly. We're going to be either the coolest, I think it was $7K or something like that. We were like, this is going to be the coolest party ever for 100 of our closest friends, or it's going to go
something
well.
real.
Yeah.
It was bigger than that.
1,500 people showed up.
Really?
the
Yeah,
first
because I was
year.
officing right by there. Maybe that
Yes.
was first year, second year. I don't know.
1,500 people.
What year
showed
was
up.
that?
That was
2018?
when was that? 2015.
Oh, wow. So it's been
Yeah.
a little while. Okay.
2015. And so we raised $15K for the library.
Nice.
Just through badge sales. And we paid for our expenses. We had all this other stuff. I was like, this is great. What can we do
Do I
next?
have to go to Denver?
Well, yeah.
I mean, you
I don't
still
have to
can.
drive to... I can. But now we have options.
Right,
And so
right.
we said, we got to do this better next year. So we brought on Todd Jones, who's our vendor coordinator, and he did... he's got his own show now, too, also, the Wicked West Comic Expo,
Cool.
which is out of the ranch. And we purposefully kept the badge prices low. So we said, we want a family of 4 to come in for under $100.
Yeah.
And so the badges for adults are $20. The badges for kids are $10. The badges for 5 and under are free. So they can come in and
Seems like you got margins still to raise prices, but
I mean, we could, but we also understand that there's an audience who needs that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so for the folks, and it's mostly teens, who don't or can't pay, they can go into our volunteers.
Yeah.
And so for a 2-hour shift or a 3-hour shift, depending on where they want to be at the con, they get in for the entire weekend for free.
cool.
And so it grows the staff organically
Yeah,
as a result of that, because almost all of our existing staff came up through the volunteer ranks.
Right. They already know pretty much the story, how it needs to go.
Exactly. And so then they said, oh, well, I want to do something. And so one of the things that came out of that was the Kessel Run 5K. And so we did a 5K around the library to help promote. And this was right after Leonard Nimoy had passed away from COPD, and Carrie Fisher had died of a heart attack. And so we must get our geeks out exercising. Like, we have to, like, there is no excuse. We have to do something in health, like teach them about. And so we created the 5K. And then we created the Couch to 5K program, because one of the participants in that program was like, we can do this better, and we can teach people how to run it, and we can get more attendees, and it can feed itself.
Yeah,
And so
I like it.
every week there was
That's great language to use, by the way, too.
Right?
Because I've run a few Couch to 5Ks.
Yeah. And it gets you able mentally and physically able to do the thing.
Yeah,
And mentally
yeah.
is the more trick, right?
For sure. Yeah.
It seems like a lot, and it is a lot until it isn't.
Right.
And I had that same experience, and I never really believed it, because I never got to run the actual 5K. I would always participate in the Couch to 5K, and I never did the 5K because I was organizing it.
Right. Well,
And then I was like, oh, well, I could do the firecracker, or I could go do the whatever, and I never got to it.
I'm going to do the Wild West Relay again this
Nice.
summer. Relay to Steamboat from Fort Collins. Do you want to be on the team?
If you can, like I said, if I can run really slowly.
3 legs, average of 6 miles apiece.
Yeah, I might be able to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm teasing.
yeah,
So I want to talk about the hot sauce
Yeah.
before we move on to the faith, family, politics.
yeah.
Talk to me about the why of the hot sauce. You said this is 1 year, 2 years old?
Yeah, so it's just a little over 1 year old. And we have 5 different flavors. We're in all 30 Sprout stores in Colorado.
Wow.
And
do you have an inside with the Sprouts people or something? Or how do you,
No.
why did they do that?
Is
it just that good? I'm trying to unwrap it right now as we speak.
Yeah, you can just, if you unscrew the top,
it'll
it'll pop
push it up.
right off. Yeah.
Okay.
So the that one's really heat
It
shrunk
is.
wrapped.
I'll find a knife. No,
Yeah.
keep going.
So I also have
You have a knife in
little
your
knife.
pocket?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, give me that.
There you go. All right, so Kurt's gonna open the hot sauce while we do this.
I'm going to taste it too. What? Live on air.
I should have brought you like a charcuterie board or
Cracker
something like that. Like,
yeah. No, I'm
show
just
up to
going
your
to. I'm just going
podcast with
to. I'm just
empty-handed.
going to dip it on my finger a little bit and taste it.
Note to future guests: show up with a charcuterie board, and that's
There you go. Well, nah, don't.
The best
That would be
guest
too
ever.
much. Too fancy.
Thank you. Okay, so I had all these recipes from high school, and back then I was
okay.
I love to make
So
salsa.
computers and hot sauce and salsa.
Yeah, my first domain name was salsaontheweb.com.
Okay.
and I just loved the idea of like making things for people, but I did
Very
not
smoky.
understand. Yeah, so that's smoked chipotle, and it's the straight malt whiskey from Copper Muse. There's smoked paprika in there. It's
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's good on
Very
chicken.
distinctive.
Thank
yeah.
you. Yeah, so we had all these, and I didn't know anything about commercial kitchens or food safety back
Right.
then. And so I said, oh, I want to start selling salsa. And, dog would come running through the kitchen and like dog hair everywhere. I'm like, oh, well, maybe not.
Right.
And so fast forward to Fort Collins Startup Week,
Okay.
where I met Gabe from the Crooked Cup
Yeah.
And Zoe's Bakery. And I said, I want to do something special for a speaker gift. And I want to put together a hot sauce for the speakers. And so we made that a possibility. But then all of the hoops that you have to jump through in order to label it. Like if you just want to give it away, that's one thing.
Right.
But you still have to go through all of the steps, right? And so you have to get it.
Well, you don't really want to poison your guests and speakers and stuff.
Acidic food certification, like all of this, like it has to have ingredients labels and everything. And so we were literally an LLC filing and a UPC code away from doing it proper.
Yeah.
I said we should just do this proper. And so filed the LLC, got the UPC code, talked to Gabe, and because he teaches food marketing at Front Range, and so I just bounced some ideas back and forth off him, and we can do this. Why not? And so Emily Shirts created the awesome branding and all of the labels.
And where's the name come from?
For the Win. So FTW is a gaming.
For the Win.
Yeah, FTW, and it's the inverse of WTF.
Right.
And so I was like, I had this For the Win marketing idea concept back from when I was like,
too scared to do WTF.
Well, WTF was like too edgy because it was right after that incident with the client who was like, I can't do business with you.
Right.
And then my mentor stepped in and was like, no, really, stick with this. But that was the outcome, the ultimate outcome. And all of the sauces have some sort of gaming or geeky bent. So Firefly Me to the Moon is from Firefly.
Are you selling this to nerds and geeks and stuff too?
So it's
a niche sauce in some ways.
The interesting thing about all of these is most of them are fruit based. And so the first one I ever made was a raspberry mole, and it has all of the peppers and the pepper mashes are fermented.
Oh,
and so it takes a lot of the heat right off the front end.
Yeah,
and it makes it
deposit its on the fly on the backside.
So you get the amazing flavor profile up front, and if you add more and more, it gets spicier and spicier and spicier. And that's the beauty of fermented sauces. So we ferment the peppers, then we mix in all the awesome ingredients, and then have it all prepped and ready.
Oh wow!
And so you get that taste of Ghosted. It's a ghost pepper hot sauce.
Sure.
And most people like the bragging rights of being able to say, I have a ghost pepper hot sauce.
Right.
They don't have to have the insane
eat
burn.
Most of it, though.
Right. You can never taste it. And so now people can.
Because I actually love the flavor of habanero when it isn't cranked up to number 9 heat.
Yeah. And 2 of our sauces, the carrot cake is a lie and Blucifer berry, both of those have habanero in them. So, and they're vanilla. They also have vanilla and some other cinnamon and allspice.
I'm going to keep an eye out for that and grab a bottle. And thank you for this one in the meantime. So you're in the Sprouts. Do you want to grow that?
I do. And we're using LoCo Food Distribution to get out to do the thing. And they're a really cool company to work with.
Yeah, well, that's where we took our name from. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
I called Elizabeth and said, hey, can I steal your name? Because I was going to register LoCo Think Tank, which 10% of people still call me.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, that restricts me to Northern Colorado.
Yeah.
But LoCo stands for Local Community Think Tank.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at least, I don't know what Elizabeth stands for, but I assume the same.
It was such a nice thing, right?
Yeah, it's a nice thing, and I was a big advocate for her way back when.
That's cool. And they're still rocking it. Their team is amazing. They taught us all about how to get the packaging right and how to interface well with Sprouts, and so I didn't have an in with them. They had they call it a category reset, where they have this like, you have chips or you have popcorn or you have a whatever, and you can send in samples.
We're firing everybody, and we're interviewing a few.
Re-audition, yes,
right, basically.
And so I sent in my stuff. Now, I have to give a shout out to Rachel from Life's a Booch Kombucha.
Yeah,
Rachel Walker. Absolutely amazing, super generous with her knowledge and resources. And she came in and said, well, you should let me introduce you to the folks at Lucky's, because most of the folks that I had worked with them. And so I said, that's great. And so she introduced me to Sam over at Lucky's. And Sam said, here, give us a sample. And, okay, here's how this works. And here's where we can put you on the shelf and whatever else. And it was just this really nice, just organic
Is Sam the
growth.
Kind of longer haired guy that seems to be kind of running a lot of the place there?
He's a shorter haired guy now, I think.
Okay.
He's
he's
the
decorated
back of house
well a lot
grocery.
of times. Yeah.
And so they have a lot of really cool.
By the way, if Rachel is listening, I'm still brewing kombucha on top of my cupboards. Thank you for the starter.
Isn't it awesome?
It was January of 2020. I've been a homebrew kombucha guy for 3 years now because I'm too cheap to buy the Life's a Booch, which you should buy if you don't brew your own. Buy that.
And what's really fascinating, Life's a Booch has 6 grams of sugar in a bottle, right? And whereas most similar for the same ounce has 10 to 20.
Oh, wow.
And you just get a sugar bomb. But
Right.
her kombucha, 6 grams, and it's still amazing. And she just started a fruit leather.
Well, the
second
point is
product.
kind of let that critter chew up that sugar.
Yeah.
I love it when I use honey and I get the thick like double frisbee size. Anyway, I digress.
SCOBY nerd.
SCOBY nerd. Yeah, so she's
your
doing
next
some kind of leather
podcast.
out of the SCOBYs. Does she want my old
Yes.
SCOBYs?
No, I don't. Well, she
Probably not my little ones. She's got big industrial size ones
she
now.
has the massive ones, and so, and she mixes it with her fruit mashes, which is they're really good.
Oh, I've seen
Also
that.
super low sugar,
Yeah,
and they're at
yeah.
the checkouts at Lucky's, and I think
Yeah.
at Natural Grouch.
So the punchline was, did you get in there too?
Yes, at Lucky's and the Cupboard.
Nice.
And I got a chance to celebrate at the Cupboard's 50th. Ace Hardware in Old Town.
Cool.
They brought me into, and just I love Ace Hardware because they're all locally family owned usually, and they're all independent.
Well, I
from
was just
each
telling
other.
you how I wanted to do a hot sauce called the LoCo Experience, but maybe I should do a line of spices and sauces called the LoCo Experience and have different things or something. I don't know.
What's funny is when we did ours, the folks who run Slice turned around to Gabe and said, "Hey,
Yeah.
we want to run a hot sauce too. Can we
Right.
make one?" And so Gabe runs Crooked Cup, and so he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So they have now their Slice Chipotle
Slice sauce,
Ghost,
something?
I think,
Yeah.
and then
Oh,
also
cool.
there's a
Sweet. Well, I'll call Gabe next week,
yeah.
actually, or maybe even tomorrow to
Yeah.
figure out my hot sauce solution.
Yeah.
So,
and he does a cold brew habanero or something like that with his.
Oh,
So
really?
it's, yeah, it's
Good for
really
him.
good. Yeah.
we always do faith, family, politics
Mm-hmm.
at the close of this show. Do you know which one you'd like to take on first and what you'd like to talk about?
I'll let you pick.
Well, we talked about politics a little bit already.
Yeah.
Do you want to, like you said, you're an independent. I'll take us there. You said you're an independent,
Yeah.
non-affiliated. Like, talk to me about the why of that, if you would.
The party system, the two-party system, and this is founding fathers logic, right? That they knew it's in the Constitution that that's in
The Declaration,
or
or some of the other founding letters and things.
Yeah, it's in their writings. They have that the two-party system is ultimately a catastrophic outcome, which leads to hyperpartisanism.
Two wings of the same bird.
Yeah, and they fight against each other. And this was, in my experience, going door to door. Almost everybody had similar goals, but different methodologies to get there.
Yeah.
And so everybody kind of wanted the same things.
Yeah.
But
The fixers and the nixers.
Exactly. And so they wanted to make sure that the things that they, prioritized were the things that either got funded or that there was enough for, all of the things. And so it's, for me, I've never really wanted to be a part of that bigger party network. And even when the after the campaign, the Colorado Center Party said, "Well, you could join us," and I was like, "That's not really where I'm at either."
Yeah, yeah.
I really appreciate it. And don't get me wrong, the folks who are up and down in both of the parties are super nice. They're smart. They're resourceful. They know their stuff, and they know how to connect with people well.
Yeah.
And they know their audience. And it's where the game playing comes in that I just detach from that because
well,
I'm
the
much
fact
more.
that you can't really be a free independent thinker in our national political system at all.
It's hard.
Even in our local Fort Collins City Council system, it's pretty hard.
The perfect example is the bag fees, right? And so
Right.
the bag fees it could have easily been much more regressive than it was, but ultimately it puts a lot of pressure on the frontline workers,
Sure.
who don't have a ton of disposable income to spend on like mental health or days off or anything else like that.
Right.
They're getting all of the heat for this policy and none of the support, which they should have had. But there's also during that time, because we have COVID, masking, all this other stuff that was happening concurrently, and so you just have this rage that was built up in the
Right.
in the consumer base.
The final
irrational
straw
rage, exactly.
is that you're going to charge me for my bags. I'm
Yeah.
a little bit that way. Like, I've taken my shopping cart full of groceries, not in bags, out to my van and put it all in the seat of my van so that I didn't buy a bag, because I'm not going to buy a bag. Even
And
if I
it's-
forgot my fucking bags and I don't, 10 cents is 10 cents. I'm just not going to do it. I'm
Exactly.
because I
Yeah.
was opposed, frankly,
Yeah.
to subjecting those people to that trauma and to little stores suffering.
Well, and now it's statewide, and so that's coming down the pipeline.
Right.
For
Well,
everything.
and I use my leftover grocery bags
Yeah.
for trash bags
Right.
at LoCo Think Tank. And so
Yeah.
now I got to buy my own trash bags for
Yeah.
LoCo Think Tank. I was recycling already.
And there was literally nobody on the other end of that issue environmentally, right? We all get it. There's microplastics.
Sure.
People are getting sick. We can see in our blood tests that there's like BPA and polyphenols and all of these other things that are sitting out there. We get it. But how do you implement that? And what does it look like when we know our recycling system can't handle the like clamshell containers that
Right.
99% of our produce comes in? So
Right.
what do you do about that?
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah.
Oh, even the raspberries and
Yeah.
the strawberries
No,
and
you
stuff.
can't put it in the
handle that?
recycling. Yeah.
Oh, I do.
Doesn't that make you
Shit,
feel
I'm
bad?
sorry. It
No,
does.
see, this is the thing.
Because I drag like styrofoam containers out of there all the
Yeah.
time, and people throw wrong things in recycling, and I'm like,
Yes.
here, I'll pull that out for you.
Yes,
But I didn't realize about the clamshells.
absolutely. Constantly. And
Oh,
this
that's
is
like
the thing.
a third of my recycling.
Yeah. And so you have to be careful with it because some of them you can if they're the thick ones, but some of them you can't, and it depends on your municipality and whatever else.
Yeah.
But in any case, we had this education issue, and it's a practical education issue. It's not like because most people will do right if they can, and it's easy enough.
Right.
But
It's just so hard to communicate with people because there's a million ways to get your information these days.
And Gallegos, before they were a republic, tried leaning in and doing
Yeah,
community
yeah,
education,
yeah.
and they had an entire sheet, and they said, "Here's what you can and can't put in."
Right.
And
I
it's
just
always
threw mine
like-
away.
Right?
I literally did because Jill got some kind of a cool thing to hang on the wall there
Yep.
near where our trash can is. I was like, nobody follows this anyway.
Right.
But thank you, Gallegos, for that excellent guide that I apparently didn't follow with regards to my clamshells.
It's exactly right. And so you have to have that sort of eye for what's the end goal and what's the bigger policy. So back in the day, the Spring Creek Gardens
Yeah.
didn't exist. That was owned by CSU.
Yep.
And the UCA, which is the University Center for the Arts, where the experimental flower
Yep,
gardens is,
yep.
did not exist either. Fort Collins owned that. What ended up happening was a land swap. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
now we have the UCA and the experimental flower gardens, and we have Spring Creek Gardens, which is this amazing resource for the community.
Yeah.
Fast forward a couple decades to Hughes, and you have this amazing opportunity for open space. Now, CSU would never, ever, ever have developed it. Ever.
Right. That's
you
not
had
what
to
they
invest
do.
a ton of money just to get it back to where you could develop on it.
Right.
So like $7 million just to develop it.
Yep.
To start day one with a shovel. $7 million. It was never, ever going to happen. They could talk a big game about putting houses and whatever else to like drive a market value. It was never, ever going to happen.
Yeah.
So when presented with this ballot initiative, which put it on the ballot for voters to decide, does Hughes become open space or not? And should we force the city to buy it? What could have happened, alternatively, in a different universe, we could have had a land swap, right? That historical perspective was really important. We could have had a land swap because CSU could have gotten a fair market value for it, and the city could have paid a fair market value. Instead of what happened is the voters decided to force the issue,
Right.
and then we had to buy it back at whatever that proper rate was that
Right.
was determined by, we can do this.
Who the hell knows?
Exactly.
Right.
And it was swapped for land on like Timberline or whatever, where everything's, it's off the max line. It doesn't have any great support for
Right.
public transit and all the rest of this stuff. And so it was equal swap, but at a huge cost to the taxpayers. They overpaid essentially. For
Well,
this
and
open
sometimes
space.
voters are dumb.
No,
There's a reason that we have representative government And like I was just thinking, we were just talking about the property use code, land use code too.
Yeah.
And all the changes there.
Voters, I would say that voters go for and it's just like recycling. They look at what is the best outcome and what's easy to do and how do we get there the fastest way.
Right.
It's because they know that in 2 years, the person who's running the show is going to switch over. And in 2 years, they're going to have to do it again. Yeah. And
so how would you quantify your politics in a statement? Like, you don't want to be part of these systems because of their grabby hands, but how should we act as a nation,
neighborly,
as a city, neighborly?
Neighborly.
Yeah.
And just talk to, I was the president of my HOA people hate their HOAs, and for good reason in most cases. Ours won a statewide award because we actively talked to our neighbors. We communicated with them well. They knew when the board meetings were. Despite that, we are still not hitting quorum because of all of this other stuff. But like, as long as you're communicating and open and honest and transparent, folks will pay attention. And I think that that's really about being neighborly. You can still disagree just fine.
Totally.
But just be honest about like, oh, well, we disagree about that, but I think that we can still figure out a way to
There's some
accomplish
space
the
where
same
we can
goal.
both have some. Yeah. That's part of the reason why I talk about faith, family, and politics, because just to highlight that notion that we need to talk about things if we're going to fix them.
Oh, for sure.
Like smashing each other when we have power is not really the best way for a united nation in the future.
Well, and that joke earlier, like I crave power, like it's about if you have a useful skill, be willing to volunteer it.
Yeah.
And if you are in a position of power, send that elevator back down.
Yeah.
So I am no longer the president of
Ask
my
of your
HOA.
need and share of your abundance.
Exactly. I'm no longer the president. I stepped back when another neighbor said, I'm interested in doing that. Can I do? And absolutely. Like, let's nominate you. Let's get you going. Let's roll in this process so that you have the opportunity to lead.
Yeah.
And there's this weird, I think it's an American dynamic. It feels like it's an American dynamic of like, if I'm not in charge of the thing, then there's no point.
Right.
Then
I'm anti to it or like disengaged from it.
And folks who are super well traveled or from other countries where they have a different understanding of power dynamics, so like you can still be influential without being in control.
You should read my old blog from it's called Leadership at Every Level.
Nice.
And it's basically the notion that leadership is anything that you do that impacts the behavior of anybody else.
Yeah.
And to be a leader, whatever level you're at in the world and your time and place.
Well, that's why I love our local board system, because in the city, you can volunteer for a board and you can have a 1-year term or you can have a 4-year term.
Right.
And you can volunteer your skills to a particular area of interest. Same thing with like leadership Fort Collins or leadership Northern Colorado or leveraging local leaders. Like even if you're not running for politics, you can learn about the local systems and invest yourself in those things to help make the things better. And it does really encourage you to like, oh, my neighbor's running for city council or my neighbor's running for Senate. Like,
should I support him or push against him?
Exactly. And so folks who are, running in this last House race, I would talk to everybody. I just, this is what I know. This is what I learned. We better figure these things out. And I had campaigns that I was supporting, and we would talk.
So what's going to happen in the House? We're in the midst of the never-ending speaker vote contest right now. It seems like they're squeezing him for just enough humility to get enough people on board, or are the hardliners just going to like screw Kevin?
When you have.
He acted like such a pompous ass coming into the contest.
Oh, well, I mean, you have a certain sense of entitlement, I think.
Right.
So
I think that's been stripped of him.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kevin.
There's a.
I think it's kind of funny, actually, but whatever.
I hate it when
I actually like it when our government is dysfunctional. I like that when that happens. As a libertarian, I'm like, sweet.
I have the complete opposite reaction to that, because I'm like, I really want you all to be able to fix something that's happening, or make wise decisions by coming together as a council.
At least somebody's got to get like sworn in.
Yeah, yeah. You have to be able to function as even neighbors who are of communities. You have to
they disagree with each other, whatever.
And especially when it comes to like water rights and how we negotiate water rights. And in Colorado, we have really cool negotiations about all of those things.
Yeah,
and they're passionate, and there's a lot of like weird little technical details that have to be pulled out of the muck, but like ultimately there's an agreement at the end of the day.
Right.
And people are sitting at the table.
Still something you can shake hands about.
Yes.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of walks away unhappy, which is diplomacy. So that's
Right.
So
Fair.
I don't know what's going to happen in the House. Honestly, I think that the two-party system is completely toxic. You heard the minority speaker come and say we have this unification of Democrats, and he listed off 4 insider terms for the different factions of Democrats.
Right.
And if this was national news,
Right.
and we're like, whoa,
They're
hold
so
on.
unified.
Right? And
And they're twice as unified as the Republicans.
so I lean into this idea of like the more neighborly we can be. Like, I don't know if you've met Joe Nagoose. Like Joe goes to a lot of different events too, but like, he's super down to earth. He'll talk to anybody. He'll talk to you about your kids. He'll talk to you about his kids. He'll talk to you about like his family, what their experience is. And he has this understanding of like where his knowledge boundaries are. And he'll like ask as much as he can.
One of my friends said of Wade Troxel years ago, I really like that guy. I can't tell if he's a Democrat or a Republican hardly, and I think that's what I hear you saying is have more independent thought, community engagement, relationship-driven politics, and
a local perspective.
Keep the party power to a minimum, and we'll be happier as a nation.
Party politics often ignore locality.
Yeah, for sure.
And so there's strength in that unification sometimes when it works.
Right.
When it doesn't work, it's hyper dysfunctional.
Super toxic.
It's very toxic to local communities who are depending on their representative
to actually communicate with each other.
Yeah, to represent their interests.
Yeah.
And so when you have, I think McCarthy is in an interesting spot.
We'll save our predictions. I want to get you out of here in a reasonable time, and we've been rambling a lot. It's fun. Family.
Yeah.
Tell me about your family.
So I have 2 kiddos.
Okay. And tell me about you have a wife?
Yeah.
Too?
So
we didn't find the romance there along the way. Where did you find her?
So Stacy and I met online. Big surprise there, given my profession.
Proclivity.
Yeah. And so she lived up in Winter Park, and I was here at CSU, and so we met, and 3 months later we were married.
Wow.
And it was a really fast turnaround. we knew exactly what we wanted. She's super smart, hyper driven, and had this. I wanted to go and be a teacher, and so for a time she was a special ed para at PSD. Has her master's in elementary ed. Is crazy dedicated to making sure kids have a really good educational experience.
How was it that you two could be confident about each other within 3 months? Like, what was it vice versa? You could speculate on her part, but on your part at least, what made you say yes?
We just knew. I mean, it was you get that feeling about And okay. So this is my vice, my guilty pleasure. Stacy and I watch like Married at First Sight and Love Is Blind and like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette and all these other, and you understanding that there are some moments you just roll your eyes at, but like for the most part, when people are honest and straightforward and there's that really genuine connection, you can just see it and feel it,
sure.
and you know that they're meant. And so like, that was
you just had that.
That was our experience.
Yeah.
And I we built a life together. So we bought a house here in Fort Collins, and then we just made a family. So
very cool.
Yeah. So 2 kiddos.
Tell me about
boy and a
them.
girl. My son is a virtuoso when it comes to music.
Okay.
He has a different interest every week, and very interested in.
How old is he, and what's his name?
He's 8, and his name is Ryland.
And we try to do a 1-word description for the kids. If you haven't been listening,
he's driven. And he's driven to learn.
Yeah.
And we on his iPad, and I know screen time's a thing, so whatever. But on it, he uses his iPad to compose music.
Wow.
Like
at 8 years old?
Yes. And he is learning violin. He picked up the violin and was playing it without being screechy. He could play a long note with a bow draw like within the first week and did it really well.
Wow.
And it was like, I want to play this. And he learned like portions of Rush E, which is a really fancy like piano piece.
Okay.
And so he's been like practicing on that.
Dang.
So he doesn't have, because he's 8, he doesn't have like the emotionality and the tonality just yet, but given
His
enough
imitation is pretty significant already.
Yeah. He's learning. He picked up the recorder within 5 minutes on the recorder. He was playing Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I was just like, what do you do?
That's pretty awesome.
Like, I played saxophone, when I was in high school, like Colorado Honor Band and all the rest of that stuff. And like,
So he's got some history there.
Yeah. But like, and Stacy's crazy musical too. But like, she plays flute, piccolo.
That sounds like a place of opportunity for this young man
Yes.
in the future.
And so he's very, very, very interested in all things.
The
musical
robots
right now.
won't take over saxophone playing early on.
A
A lot like they will writing.
yeah.
Anyway,
I
blog
think-
writing is getting interesting.
Yeah. There's going to be an asterisk, and I think there's actually going to be a law requiring if you put your work out as AI, you have a tariff on top of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
I think
an
it'll
interesting
be 'cause
option, yeah.
Humans can't compete on that
to pay
same
to
level.
who? For what? Just pay it to the government general fund?
You pay it to because it's a part of your cost, right?
Yeah.
So it'd be part of your. So you can't charge a penny.
But to who?
You charge $10 to the end customer. I mean, that's really where it's going to come from. The tariff will sit there and it'll go to the local state government, art programs,
Yeah,
or
something like
educational.
that.
Yeah, something like that. It'll help. It'll be like the
Well,
Colorado
because if
Go
we
grants.
can't keep writing well, then
Yeah.
like they won't have anybody good to copy.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's in a whole nother 2-hour podcast right there.
Yeah.
Um,
Deep dive.
So let's jump to faith.
Yeah.
What do you have for a faith perspective to share?
Oh, I didn't mention Clara. So
Oh yeah,
Clara's-
sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
Clara
Sorry,
is my
Clara.
6-year-old. She's super creative.
Thank you.
Creative is what
That's
I would
her word.
say. Yes. Oh my goodness. So she is an artist, straight through and through.
Yeah.
Makes houses, doll houses, people.
Oh, fun.
Draws. Has like
At 6?
Yes, very detailed drawing, like just incredibly
Wow.
astute. And both of them love to read. So my 8-year-old just finished the entire Percy Jackson series.
So were you and your wife like in the Mensa
No.
department on the online dating app or something like that? That's what I'm starting to get the impression is you're a lot smarter than I am.
No, I think we all have talents.
Fair.
And
Well, these kids sound amazing, so
yes,
you're blessed.
They're wonderful. They're equal parts frustrating too. So it's
Right.
Not, it's
Well-
not just to put the mental health brakes.
Yeah, well, the
It's
gifted and talented means
Yes.
very talented at pissing mom and dad off sometimes or
they're,
whatever.
They're
so.
really adept at getting their way, and also finding the buttons to push. Right.
Right,
So that's
right.
as all kids are.
Yeah.
So, it's I can't complain because I know that there are folks who are out there that have worse off.
Yeah.
And their kids have a lot bigger struggles or whatever else. So I tend to just be really happy with who they are.
Yeah. Hold them
whatever,
loosely.
yes,
encourage.
holistically encouraging.
Yeah, I like
whatever becomes of them is what they are.
I
So
like
that's
it.
awesome.
I like it. No, that's it's obvious that you're very proud
Oh yeah.
of these kids that you've
Yeah.
got, and the no more
No,
6 and 8 call it.
this two is enough.
Well, I've met people a lot of times that are like, they got a 6 or 8, 10-year gap between their.
I really, I think there's brain damage, right? And this is probably there's brain
Unwilling to
damage.
sign up for further brain damage.
Yeah, because you forget, right? You're like, you look, and the Siri's really good about this, or Facebook sometimes too, reminding you of like, oh, remember like 8 years ago when they were like super cute, and you, like, yeah, but I also wasn't sleeping or eating or productive. So there's a big trade off.
Yeah.
But good on you if you want more or fewer your family dynamic.
Yours are not available,
No,
nor
I'm-
are you looking to
I'm
add.
out.
Okay, fair enough. Got another 14 years. You'll be fine. Damn, 16.
I joke. I was like, we could adopt if we really wanted to go that route and not go through the physical trauma of
Right? Yeah.
all of the, because it's hard.
Jill
on
and I
women, too.
do exchange students.
There you go.
So, like, taking in rich
Yeah.
people's kids from other countries is
Yeah.
way less commitment, but has kind of that same influence. So once
Or
yours
Big
get
Brother. I mean, there's a ton of
a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and you could volunteer for like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts.
Sure.
There's so
Yep.
Boys and
So
Girls
much demand
Club.
there.
Yes. Kids need good mentors.
True.
And we just had that PSD. It was an entire Colorado educational study.
Oh.
And kids don't feel like they have trusted adults to talk to.
Wow.
1 in 3 feel like they have a trusted adult. 1 in 3.
Which tells me that, like, are kids as parents being very bad at it, or are kids being kind of like programmed not to trust their parents and stuff? Is some of that stuff coming in the vernacular?
I think when there's
we're drifting back to politics in a way now here, but
when you're growing up, it's hard. When you're growing up, it's hard to like know who you can talk to about your like identity or whatever else, your interests, whatever. And there's so much politic leaning in to like, govern like, oh, you can't say this, or you should be doing these things, or, oh, that's not PC or whatever. And like, no, kids need answers. Like, they're going to Google it. Like, they need to have somebody who's
they'll
not
find somebody
Google.
that's going to tell them what to believe.
Exactly. And it's a message board. And if it's a message board, it's not you as the parent. And so if your kids can't feel comfortable coming to talk to you about whatever it is, and you haven't opened that dialogue with them to have honest discussions, then it's really problematic. And I think that teachers aren't really empowered to do that. There are ample resources in PSD, and I'm really proud of our PSD, our local.
And it used to be families and villages were closer a lot, and there was neighborhood people that would stay around forever, and they were kind of a mentor for the different kids and stuff. But we all just park in our garages now and walk into our houses and then play on the computer until it's time for bed.
Yeah. And those
whatever.
small disagreements turn into big rifts instead of like what they, like, oh yeah, I can take your trash can, and like, I don't mind that. Like,
right.
Let me help you with your
Well,
stuff.
I had an incident on an airplane. I went partying the night before we left Mexico, and I had this like sinus draining, and I had a cough and stuff. And the lady in front of me on the airplane was very COVID nervous and stuff, apparently. And I don't know, every 10 minutes or something, I would have to like, just kind of and close to the end of the flight, she was like, do you mind covering your mouth? And I had sometimes and stuff, but it wasn't. And I was like, yeah, and just ask, and tell me what you need. Yeah. And then, like, that was just fine. And then her son, like, from across the plane, like, chimed in and, like, basically made me almost to the point of being like, you could both screw off.
Yeah.
But just ask. Like, if your neighbor is leaving his garbage cans out and it's in the way of your car when you're trying to leave to work the next day, like, tell them. Don't, like, harbor this grudge of resentment and anger because somebody doesn't know what you have perceived, because chances are you're telling yourself a story that isn't true.
Oh, for sure. Everybody lives in their own heads.
Right.
So much. And it's hard to, I mean, as the president of an HOA, right, you get that a lot.
Right.
Of like, I don't know what's happening in your personal life right now, but very clearly this is an irrational level of anger that you have about some.
And if you just talk to your neighbor for 2 minutes, you might find that this problem can just go away instead of writing a 10-page letter to the HOA board.
Yeah. And that's what, our board was really good at. It was walking around and talking with people.
Yeah. That's cool.
So
you have to do a lot less actually conflict resolution if you just like engage once in a while.
People love it.
And whether it's marriages or kids or whatever.
Yeah. And if you just talk, I mean, that's really the whole thing is just communicate. And the words, you have to both go into it with the understanding of like the words are going to be clunky. People don't always talk eloquently when they want to, not as well. The word choice is poor sometimes, but the intent, if the intent is to connect, then there's honest intent behind the thing. Usually.
So moving on to faith, do I remember correctly that you're going to burn in hell because you don't love God? Just kidding. Sorry, I think I remember a conversation earlier. I'm playing. But sorry.
I would be delightfully called a humanist.
Okay. Yep.
I'm so, and Will Wheaton coined that phrase.
Yeah.
So he identifies as that, and so I think a lot of us geeks are really kind of in that same vein of like,
which is what
people are smart enough to figure out problems, and there's not really an external deity required
Okay.
Or responsible for outcomes of things.
Fair.
And people.
Is there a creator?
I would probably call myself agnostic because I think that we are the idea of like Q from Star Trek, like this
Right.
omnipotent, omnipresent, like all-powerful being who's kind of snarky and just like another level of human,
Right.
probably exists out there somewhere and just is too bored to deal with us at this
Right,
moment.
right.
So yeah, I think that there's almost certainly something more advanced, more powerful, more present.
Something
more
designed us a little bit or whatever, maybe ish.
Yeah, when you
or
look
at least
at-
set things in motion,
When you look at the elegance of the universe,
or like DNA.
yeah, there's purpose to life. And what that is, and can we categorize it? Does it look like us? I think it's a little ego driven. Like, it's us learning about the universe. Is the universe learning through us? Like, I think that those things are important questions.
Yeah.
And I really like the idea, having read Percy Jackson now, I love the idea of conceptual deities that come into play when something's important and then fade away when it's not, right?
That's almost like the old Greek gods and stuff was kind of relevant to that.
Yes.
Right?
And so when it's something like...
Instead of having like a patch for all problems, like Jesus is trying to be kind of having a tool for the right problem,
Yeah.
if you will. Sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
one of the things I was thinking of with that kind of humanist and just trusting in people's
Yeah.
wisdom, which I think is, a lot of the wisdom of the wisdom books has been boiled up from that soup. But one of the things is the lack of a shared values is really challenging to our humanity now. And can we depend on humanity to come up with a shared value set that we could agree with?
Sure.
And so
before AI takes it all away from us.
right, or before the Christians and the atheists battle it out, or who knows? I don't know.
Yeah,
Because I think that's one of the big frictions I see in society is like there's this value set, and then there's this one and this one and this one. And everybody's got their own value set, but there isn't really a shared. Like if you don't believe LGBTQ plus is like the best thing ever, you're kind of terrible these days, according to one side of the spectrum. But according to the other side, it's like if you do believe that, you're terrible too.
yeah, and I
As a small example, although I'm in the camp of take everybody as an individual and
Right.
love them and appreciate their special value.
Right.
For me as a creative being. But yeah, so that would be
Yeah.
my big question to you as like the absence of God creates kind of an absence of anything more important than the state. What is the values? What do we care about?
So the old school value of the church was education, right? And they were the holders of books. They were the holders of
Yeah, the old school.
Yeah,
Like
of-
Dark Ages.
yeah,
Okay.
of art and literacy and
Yeah.
creative endeavors. And the folks that were patrons of the artists were also high up members of religious institutions oftentimes, or kings or queens, or and so
Yes, but it's hard to say that started there.
yeah, no, and granted,
That's where the problem with power is.
right, the folks with power and money had art created for the things that they were interested in. So, sculptors made
Sure, all the
God
Renaissance
and
stuff
Renaissance,
and
exactly.
whatever.
And so as you look forward into what the community became, right? So church was a gathering place, and
Sure.
for the Black community, church is where your extended family is, and that's where your where your social gatherings are and where your community is. And for the Latinx community, that's where you learn a lot of interesting things about your place in community and what your role is in the larger extended family of your community.
Yeah.
And they approach religion differently, right? And in much the same way as if you go to a different state or a different place. In Fort Collins, we're very almost like homogenous, right?
Yeah, well,
There's a lot of similarity in terms of how things are perceived in terms of like the religion, the role of religion, the role of education, the schools, and
You
whatever
think so?
else. Yeah, I think that there's
Oh.
more so than like if you went to like Georgia, if you went to like places in California, Idaho, like there are places that are extroverted in a way that we are not here. And
or more not extroverted, but more striated or divided in the way, like, if you're in a rich neighborhood in Baltimore, your experience with the public education system is much different than in a poor neighborhood in Baltimore.
Yeah, exactly. In Florida, I mean, there's all of these places that have their identities are more worn on their sleeves. And here, and like, here, Boulder, Denver, Aurora, like Colorado is kind of this unique space where we're much more like community
that don't really matter.
Yeah. And we're okay with like differences and things like that more so than a place that isn't. So and that's like a very Colorado centric view. I love Colorado, but the end of the day picture for me is humanism is about appreciating that. It's that Gene Roddenberry principle, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. And so you can learn things from people who have different backgrounds, different perspectives, different approaches to life that you can't learn on your own path.
Right, yeah.
And if you don't appreciate that those differences have equal value that yours do, that it creates a lot of pathways for strife, right?
Yeah.
And so, when we look at what the contributions of the LGBTQ community are, we have to look at individuals, right? And we have to look at the community as a whole, because that experience is a completely different driven thing.
Totally. Yeah, and my understanding of the world and of that topic even has only been informed by my willingness to engage in conversation with people that have lived it more.
Yeah, and it's that lived experience that drives the ability of a community to grow and learn about itself. Because the identities otherwise are hidden below the surface, because it's not and I think in some ways in that we sort of gloss over the differences in Colorado, that those identities become less relevant because they're glossed over, but that they're still driving underwritten stories that need to be expressed, and that creates a lot of strife.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Where I grew up in central North Dakota, there was Catholics and Lutherans pretty much. And they were fine. Like, the Catholics were fine with the Lutheran kids and the parents and vice versa and stuff, but they didn't really want you to marry one of them. Or whatever it was.
That's the other side of the tracks.
Right, a little bit. But they were both sides of the tracks for poor white kids from North Dakota, so there wasn't really a difference in socioeconomic. It was...
Whose flag are you going to fly today?
Right, yeah. So I do appreciate your sensitivity toward that being like more a way to divide than a way to unite.
And if you gloss over differences rather than appreciate the differences, and it has to be an organic thing, right? So the individual has to invite you into that world and to have that discussion. So without that, it's you're just trying to force it. That has to be a genuine, authentic connection there.
Last segment, the LoCo experience. Do you have something in mind already? Did you put some pre-thought? So the craziest experience of your lifetime or business journey that you'd care to describe to our listening audience? Might be a moment, might be a week, might be a year in the life. I don't know.
The most rewarding, which is not necessarily the craziest, but the most rewarding was I was working on a marketing project for Compass Collaborative School.
Jan.
Jan. And
I did some volunteering there before COVID, and I haven't reconnected. So anyway,
it's an amazing school.
Yeah, it's great.
Project-based learning, really driven teachers, and one of the students who was part of this initial brainstorming group and marketing group came up to me and said, "You run Comic-Con, right?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, I'm Indigenous, and I've never seen an Indigenous superhero. I've never seen an Indigenous comic book. I've never seen an Indigenous artist drawing any of those things or writing any of those things. And
in a comic book, basically.
And I where are we at? Where are we at?" I said, "I don't know, but I'll find out."
Yeah.
And so 2 years later, we had an Indigenous artist, Rafael Maldonado Badhand, come to the con, who had original art, original creator, original characters, had in a full series, 6-series book of this. It's called Pia, and she is a post-apocalyptic girl who's friends with this like demon dog. It's awesome. And
Yeah.
she goes on to like try and find her father and all this cool stuff. And it's this great storyline.
Yeah.
But Raf he's an organizer of the Indigenous Pop X Con that was down in Denver.
Okay.
Which has a different name this year, and I'm totally spacing on it right now. I'm sorry, Raf. But we brought in characters, and he was able to help us identify like, here are your
here's some gaps.
Yeah, here are the other folks, and here you should talk to these folks. And so it allowed us to generate a wider berth of our audience.
Yeah.
And really to, and now Raf has created our poster for this year.
Oh, cool.
So
Good.
it's like, it's come full circle, right? We didn't have
Yeah, you
visibility
answered that
on it.
question fully.
Yeah, we didn't have visibility on it. We dug in deep to find out who was in our network to do these things and could, highlight that area that was missing from our representation base.
Cool.
And it's really important to be able to representation is the most critical thing in media, and in particular for kids and identifying in pop culture and geekdom.
Right.
They need to be able to see themselves in a superhero or in a particular career or in a particular aspect of life.
Yeah.
That if they haven't been exposed to that, like it's not necessarily closed off to them, but
Yeah.
they don't really like, oh, well, I could be Superman.
I
or
aspire
could
to be Bart Simpson, actually, is pretty much my biggest dream.
Yes. Nuclear power plant
I think I'm getting
management
close.
was
No, not
easily-
Homer.
Yeah.
Bart. I want to be Bart. I just want to ride my skateboard around and...
Do you skateboard?
No.
You should.
I'm too scared. I'm
this
old,
is your identity.
man.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my son picked it up, right? And that
Okay.
was one of his things. And we took him to Launch, which is an amazing place if you haven't been there. And they teach you how to skateboard.
Oh.
And it's very
Even old
welcoming.
people?
They will teach, quote unquote, old people how to skateboard. Andy, the founder, is, I think he's somewhere between our ages.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, he's
Okay.
out there, he actually designed the Azalon Center
Yeah.
skate park.
That's a great skate park.
Yeah, it's an amazing
I've watched
thing,
kids
so-
there. I mean, my office
Yeah.
was there for years. So
Yeah, and it's a passionate community that is highly invested in art and tangential and overlaps with all of our stuff. So.
maybe I'll try to take a skateboard lesson
telling you,
someday.
it's a
I'm so
good-
scared.
it's a fun thing.
I've snowboarded a couple times, and it wasn't pretty.
It's an indoor thing. You can pay for a private lesson. You can fall and nobody will even know.
Okay.
So,
Nick, remind people again where to find WTF, Founded in FoCo, Comic-Con.
yeah. So Founded in FoCo is coming up March 1st through 3rd, and that is foundedinfoco.com. And you can Google that, but it's...
Or you can spell it, hopefully.
Yeah, foundedinfoco.com. And WTF Marketing, WTFmarketing.com, FoCo Comic-Con, FoCoComicCon.com, and For the Win Hot Sauce,
Oh, yeah.
FTWHotSauce.com.
FTW Hot Sauce?
Yep.
Nice. Any last words of wisdom for our grateful listeners that this is coming to a close?
Well, thanks for listening this far. I mean,
2
it's
hours,
really,
yeah, right?
it's a lot of listening. It's
And
too
we're not
much-
going to edit any of this out either.
It's too much Nick Armstrong.
It's never too much, Nick.
Just be kind to each other.
Yeah.
Like there's people who know things that you don't, and it's okay. And
Trust
everybody's
that.
having a rough day. So.
I agree. Cheers. Thanks, Nick. Peace out.
Thank you for listening to this episode. This is Alma Ferrer, producer of the LoCo Experience podcast. If you enjoyed this program and would like to support the show, please share it with your favorite people and leave us a review. To see upcoming guests, behind-the-scenes footage, and more, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at The LoCo Experience. Subscribe to never miss the latest interview, and until next time, stay LoCo.